Pacific Island Public Affairs Association, APAPA, Ohio Chinese American Association, OCAA, and Westlake Chinese Cultural Association, WCCA. This event is sponsored by Asian Service in Action and its ACE Civic Engagement Program. My name is Yumin Yin. I'm board chair of WCCA and APAPA Ohio president. First, I want to welcome all candidates and thank you for attending this forum to meet the AAPI community in Great Cleveland. Second, I want to thank all volunteers for your hard work to make this event happen. Finally, I want to thank the audience from our community for logging on this virtual event to meet the candidates. Next, I want to ask Susan Grego to introduce tonight's forum. Sue is an attorney and a WCCA board member. Sue. Unmute.
Good evening. A lot of work has gone into this presentation tonight, particularly this year with the hardships that COVID places on candidates and campaigns. This is an excellent way for voters to get to know more about the candidates that are running for the important offices of the Ohio courts and the State Board of Education. This is a good way to hear what the candidates are thinking, what they're committed to do if they are elected. If you need more information about candidates, they do have websites. And as a member of the Judge for Yourself committee, I encourage you to look at Judge for Yourself, which has rating information and information about candidates' experience. Over the course of this evening, the website for Judge for Yourself will appear on your screens. At this point, I would also, before I turn this over to Junxia, I would encourage everyone to vote. Please, if you've pulled a mail-in ballot, don't forget to turn it in and have it postmarked by the right time. Early voting has started, and certainly if you don't make either of those, please don't forget to go vote a week from Tuesday. It's very important. And now I'd like to turn the microphone over to Junxia, who will talk about the procedures that'll be followed tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Susan. This is Junxia Janasic, and I will introduce the procedure for tonight. 3 of our PAPA youth members, Grace Zhang, Barbara Yang, and Catherine Xiao will ask questions. Each candidate will be asked 3 questions. They will start by introducing themselves and why they're running for the office. They have 3 minutes to do that. For the next 2 questions, they will have 2 minutes each to answer them. Because we're on a tight schedule, we will remind the candidate if their time is running out. A pop-up reminder will appear on the screens, so please pay attention to that. The audience, you can post your questions in the chat room. If we have time, we will ask the candidates to answer some or all of them. If not, we will pass your questions to the candidates afterwards. Thank you. And next, Grace. Grace, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Grace, and I'm currently a senior at Hathaway Brown High School. And we're going to start out with the County Court of Common Pleas judicial candidates. So starting out with Mr. Vodry, can you please introduce yourself and why you're running? You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you to APAPA Ohio, the OCAA, and the WCCA for hosting us here this evening. We really appreciate it. My name is William Vodry. For the last 19 years, I've been serving as a magistrate of Cleveland Municipal Court, doing the hard work of a judicial officer, determining guilt or innocence in criminal cases, liability in civil cases, handling second sentencing, giving people a second chance whenever I can, and imposing jail time when I think I must. Many judges go their entire careers without ever actually having a case officially reported as Ohio precedent. I've had 21. And what I'd like to do now is take my experience, my skills, my passionate commitment to justice to a higher court. Before I was appointed to magistrate at Cleveland Municipal Court, I had the honor of serving as an assistant county prosecutor appointed by the late Stephanie Tubbs Jones. Most of my time there in the felony trial unit, including working on several homicide cases. Before that, I was a lawyer with legal aid down in Tuscarawas County, Ohio, working primarily for victims of domestic violence, helping them get civil protection orders, and also working on several multi-million-dollar class action lawsuits involving utility law that resulted in relief for thousands of Ohio consumers. My wife Susan and I just celebrated our 30th wedding anniversary. We're blessed by 3 wonderful sons, and it's partly for them that I'm running because I want to be able to help our community face some of the very serious issues that it is facing now, and see that justice is not just words on a page, but an actual promise that we keep to all those who come before the courts of this county. If I had the honor of being elected, I'd want to build on the reforms already underway in the Court of Common Pleas. Bail reform, many of you have read about. We need to be sure that we're not criminalizing poverty, and that if somebody is not a definite flight risk or a risk to somebody else in the community, that they receive a reasonable bond or even personal bond where appropriate. I'd want to strengthen the specialized dockets of the court, such as the drug court, the Veterans Affairs docket, the mental health docket, the new domestic violence docket, which typically lead to better results than treating a case as if it's simply run of the mill. A judge of mock trial for many years, I've seen the difference it can make in young people's lives. They learn how to think on their feet, they learn leadership skills. Many of them choose to go into law-related careers themselves. Unfortunately, too often when we use the courtrooms down at the Court of Common Pleas, it's rare that the judges of that court get involved. So if I have the honor of being elected, I'd want to encourage my peers to get more involved. I'm very proud of the endorsements that I have from U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, the Cleveland Stonewall Democrats, the Black Women's Political Action Committee, 11 unions, many other elected officials, community leaders, and so forth. And I hope you'll look into my campaign as well. I would welcome your help and your support. If you'd like to learn more after we meet here tonight, please check out my campaign website, which is votevodry.com, VOTEVODREY.com, or please give me a call at 216-385-8511. I'll put that confirmation or that contact information into the chat. Many thanks again for having us here this evening, and I hope you'll all vote Vodry.
Thank you. So our next question is, Asian Americans have been subject to increasing racial bias and targeting in the past few years, especially during the pandemic. What would you do to increase representation of Asian Americans in the judicial system as judges, clerks, or other positions? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Unfortunately, racism, discrimination against people who don't fit what is considered to be the norm is all too common in American society. I'm certainly aware that Asian Americans have faced that kind of prejudice. The US has a often shameful history. I think of the Chinese Exclusion Act. I think of the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. It's vitally important that we make sure that the promise of America is open to all. In my 19 years now as a magistrate of Cleveland Municipal Court, I'm proud of the fact that I've never once, even when I've been facing defendants or people who are litigants in lawsuits who have been unhappy with my decision, I've never once been accused of racism or of treating anybody differently because of the color of their skin or any other factor not relevant to the case. If I had the honor of being elected to the Court of Common Pleas, I'd certainly want to continue that record, make sure that everybody is treated fairly and impartially, without bias or prejudice, fear or favor, and that anybody who came into my courtroom could be assured that they're going to receive a fair trial and respectful treatment. That goes for Asian Americans, that goes for everybody. And if I at any time, when I have the opportunity to appoint, for instance, a law clerk or a bailiff, if any qualified Asian American were to apply, they would receive the same courteous response and the same fair consideration as any other candidate would. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And our last question is, for small businesses and people who are involved in lawsuits and appeals, the court system often seems slow. What are your thoughts about making sure that small businesses and individuals receive prompt decisions? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Well, as Dr. King taught us, justice delayed is justice denied. I had a friend once who was wrongfully discharged by the Veterans Administration, and she had a wrongful discharge lawsuit pending in a U.S. district court in an eastern state. And she once was waiting 3 years for the judge in that case to rule on a motion, not even to decide whether or not she would win the case, simply to rule on a motion. That's absolutely unacceptable. The court that I now sit on as a magistrate has a rule that we're required to rule in all contested cases within 21 days and in all cases on any motion within 60 days. And it's very rare that I miss that deadline. I would expect there might be times when, especially in a more complex matter, it would take longer. But certainly the parties have every right to expect a prompt decision on all matters. And frankly, get it right or get it wrong in your ruling. Of course, I'm going to strive to get it right, but it's better to simply decide rather than let a motion sit gathering dust for too long. If I get it wrong, then by all means appeal me, take the case to a higher court, and then have any error that I might make fixed by the Court of Appeals. But there's no reason whatsoever to sit for very long at all on pending motions and pleadings and so forth. I always try to rule promptly, and I'd certainly try to continue to do that if I had the honor of being elected.
Okay, thank you for your insightful answers. We'll be moving on to the next candidate. So Judge Robert McClelland, can you please introduce yourself and why you're running?
Thank you very much, and thank you for holding this forum. I'm Judge Rob McClelland. I've been on the bench now for 9.5 years, and I'd like to continue doing those things we've done on the bench and the programs that we've been working with. I am one of the mental health court judges. There are 5 of us, and that's been a program that has been very helpful to an underserved portion of the population. So we'd like to continue those kinds of activities as well, but I'd like to continue what I've done for the last 9.5 years, part of my 40-year career as an attorney, 31 of those years as a trial lawyer, trying over 150 jury trials, appearing in front of the Ohio Supreme Court on 7 different occasions, making those oral arguments. And since being on the bench, having over 150 trials before me, both civil and criminal, we judges do get involved. And that's why we have a veterans court and a mental health court and a domestic violence court, and the drug courts. So the judges do get involved, and they're actively involved in what's going on. I want to continue that. We have, I think, made improvements. We continue to make improvements, and I'm not done with that job. I want to complete that as best as I can. I don't think you can beat experience, and my experience is broad. Covered a variety of different kinds of cases over my career, and now additionally with all of the experience I've gained on the bench. I've been endorsed by 15 labor unions, the Black Women's PAC, Cameo, a variety of mayors. I got all excellent ratings for the 3rd straight time from Judge for Yourself. Got that in 2010, 2012. I was unopposed in 2014, and again, all 5, including the Asian bar, here in 2020. So I'd like to continue on the record I have. I think I have an excellent track record and would like to finish out doing this properly with the next term. So appreciate the opportunity to talk with you and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your answer. So again, Asian Americans have been subject to increasing racial bias and targeting in the past few years, especially during the pandemic. What would you do to increase representation of Asian Americans in the judicial system as judges, clerks, and other positions?
Well, obviously like to have as much diversity as we can in our system. We'd like to have it reflect the diversity in the community. So again, open the doors as much as possible to any kind of qualified candidates and have them involved in our system, whether it be through internships, staff attorney positions, magistrate positions, whatever we can do to have a broader group of folks in our court system. It's important to understand that the Judge Ron Adrian started a program called Equal Access to Justice. And that was a program to teach all judges, new and established judges, about open your eyes and realize we deal with a diverse world and that all the people that we should deal with equally and fairly. So it's something that should be automatic, but it's a reminder and it's a requirement for the judges to take that kind of course and be reminded on a constant basis. Most of my experience with the Asian community in the courthouse has been in civil cases. And that's been most of the extent of what I've seen. That's good news, I think, for the Asian community. I'm not seeing anybody in criminal cases. We've tried to handle those cases the same as every case that comes before us, and we'll do the same into the future.
Thank you. And last question. For small businesses and people who are involved in lawsuits and appeals, the court system often seems slow. What are your thoughts about making sure that small businesses and individuals receive prompt decisions? You have 2 minutes.
We have a number of systems and guidelines at the Common Pleas Court level. For example, we can check and see if there's any motion that it's outside of 120 days that has not been ruled upon. So we can double check for ourselves to keep those things moving and also to get the cases moving. People talk about a rocket docket, and that can often be a detriment for the parties in a civil proceeding. So it's kind of you don't want to go too fast and you don't want to go too slow, and you need to customize it to the case. A small little fender bender can probably be taken care of in 9 months, but a complex medical malpractice case might take 18 months or even 2 years. So you've got to compare it to what you're dealing with. But there's no excuse for a judge not ruling promptly. There's no excuse for a judge not maintaining what's going on in his case. I handle all of my pre-trials myself unless I'm actually in trial. So I'm on the phone with the parties, I'm meeting with the parties, they're seeing the judge. And I've done that from the day one, and I will continue to do that throughout my career because I think they want to see hands-on. That's my job. I'm supposed to be doing that. And I think it results often in better resolutions of those cases or better preparing them for trial. So it should move along at a proper pace. But again, it sounds like a lawyer, but it kind of depends on the nature of the case and how complex it is.
Thank you again for your insightful answers. Now we'll be moving on to the third candidate. Ms. Reali, can you please introduce yourself and why you're running?
Sure. My name is Magistrate Colleen and Reali, and I'm running for judge in the Domestic Relations Court. I currently am a magistrate in the court where I seek office. I've been a lawyer for 22 years, but I've been practicing in the court where I hope to be a judge for the last 6 years as a magistrate. I know what we do well as a court, and I know what we can improve. The biggest issue that our court faces is that there are more and more people coming into court who are self-represented. And I have a plan for how to address that issue and make court access make the court more accessible and more fair to folks who cannot afford an attorney. So that's one of the reasons why I'm running for this court. I have the experience in the court, and I'm the only person running in this race who has judicial experience, having been a magistrate, like I said, for the last 6 years in that court. I have all excellent ratings by Judge for Yourself. I'm endorsed by Congresswoman Marcia Fudge. I'm endorsed by the Democratic Party, and I am endorsed by all of labor, the labor unions. I'm endorsed by the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association and the Ohio State Patrol Officers Association. So I have a broad range of support. And I think the reason for that is that these folks have looked at the candidates in my race and have decided that I have the most experience and I have the proper temperament for this role. And so thank you so much for inviting me to your forum tonight. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to your members.
Thank you for your answers. Our next question is, Asian Americans have been subject to increasing racial bias and targeting in the past. So what would you do to increase representation in the judicial system? You have 2 minutes.
Okay, so the easiest way to address it, and I think the most obvious way, is that it's important that when you do hiring, if I'm lucky enough to be a judge in that court, I have the opportunity to hire staff, magistrates, and schedulers, and a law clerk. And I think it's important that when judges do their hiring, that they look around at the community and make sure that their staff is reflective of our community. So that's the first and easiest way to address that. I think it's also important when you're a judge or a magistrate like I am now to encourage different ethnic groups, different minority groups to practice in our court. Our court, domestic relations, has it's a niche practice. So there's about 50 or 60 attorneys that practice there primarily. And I think it's important. I've tried myself to take new young lawyers from different backgrounds under my wing and encourage them to practice in our court to get the expertise needed to maybe become magistrates or run for judge in our court. So that's another way to do it. And I think it's just important as a person, as a I'm a child of an immigrant myself, to acknowledge that we all come from different backgrounds, that's what America is made of, is lots of people from lots of different backgrounds, and to acknowledge that and to make sure that we treat everyone fairly. So that's another important way to address this issue.
Thank you for your wonderful answer. And lastly, for small businesses and people who are involved in lawsuits and appeal, this court system often seems slow. What are your thoughts on making sure that the small businesses and individuals receive prompt decisions? You have 2 minutes.
So I would echo what Judge McClelland had said, that every case is different. And that's something I've learned by being a judicial officer in my court, that you can't really treat every case the same. But you do have to be aware of the fact that it is often difficult for people to come down to court frequently, taking off work, taking the bus, arranging for childcare. I have a lot of folks who come to court, who appear before me, who don't get paid if they take a day off work, or if they have to leave their business, they're not making any money. So I think as judicial officers, we have to be aware of that. We're there every day getting paid to be there and to work there, but that's not always the case for folks who come to our court. I'm a big advocate for judicial case management reform. I have been trained myself at the National Center for State Courts on judicial case management. So this is one of the things that I'm attuned to and that I work very hard at doing and being aware of. I do try to move my cases as quickly as possible. I want to make sure that every pretrial is meaningful. I don't make people come down to court for no reason, for what I would consider useless appearances. So we try to be efficient. But at the same time, there are those cases, there are those outliers that take a little bit longer. And we have to make sure we're not rushing our dockets either, and that we're not we're doing something that isn't just because we want to move our cases along. So I think you just have to really take a look at each case and manage each case, and give each case a lot of attention so that you know which case can be moved along quickly and which case needs more time. And so that's what I try to do every day. So I thank you so much for allowing me to speak to your group. And I ask you to vote for Colleen Reali, Magistrate Reali, in Domestic Relations Court. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank everyone again for their wonderful answers. And now we'll be moving on to Barbara Yang. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we have one more candidate. I apologize. Okay. Lastly, Mr. Andrew Santoli, can you please introduce yourself and why you're running?
Thank you so much. My name is Andrew Santoli. I'm running for Common Police Court as well. I'm a former prosecutor. I was in our major trial unit in the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, where I handled murder cases, rape cases, gang cases, human trafficking cases. Those are basically the most important cases, complex, serious cases that you can handle in Common Police Court. Recently, I joined a civil litigation firm doing probate law, and then I also handle juvenile cases for indigent juveniles charged with crimes at Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court. Spending my time in Common Police Court, where I had a chance to litigate every day, really enlightened me to some issues that our court needs to improve on. I'm hoping to be elected judge because some of the judges there just have been kind of stagnant in moving our cases and our court system forward. We're kind of at a crossroads with how we're going to deliver justice for this next 50 to 75 years. We need meaningful bail reform. Too often, the judges in our Common Police Court have talked about bail reform, but it hasn't moved forward. We incarcerate way too many individuals who are not adjudicated, have not been found guilty yet, solely because they're poor. And we need to change that. We just need to change that. Too many individuals are charged with low-level, nonviolent crimes are sitting in our county jail. There's a big decision upcoming whether or not we're going to build a new county jail. And if they decide to build a new county jail and they decide to build it with 2,000 inmates as opposed to 1,200 inmates, we could save almost $1 billion in how we spend our money during the construction and operation of our county jail. So what I'm hoping to do, if elected, is incorporate some meaningful bail reform and also some sentencing transparency. We need judges who are going to tackle these very difficult issues. And I'm hoping, based on my immense, extensive litigation experience, knowing how that court system works, that we can make those changes. I just don't really want to be a judge to be a judge. I want to actually affect change in our criminal justice system, in our justice system, so we're doing a better job of delivering justice to our citizens.
Thank you. And I just want to apologize again for my mistake.
That's all right. Been a
Okay,
long
so
day.
yeah. Our next question is, Asian Americans have been subject to increasing racial bias and targeting. What would you do to increase representation of Asian Americans in the judicial system? You have 2 minutes.
So racism and bias is an important issue in our society. I mean, you see it every day in the news. Systematic racism is there in all walks of life. We've got to stamp it out. And this issue is very important to me. My wife is a different race than me. She grew up in the city of Cleveland. She was subjected to racism growing up. It's something we talk about. Any judge needs to be aware that maybe their background, their experiences are different than the individuals that come before them. And so any judge, no matter what race is before them, needs to understand that they absolutely have to treat everyone fairly, equally, and have some empathy. And I think that's what's sorely lacking with some of our judges in the Justice Center. We need judges that when they see an individual before them, they understand that that individual is there and it's probably the worst day of his life, and to treat them with respect and dignity. And we need to stamp out any sort of systematic racial bias. And it's only going to happen if we elect the right people to do that.
Thank you. And lastly, for small businesses and people who are involved in lawsuits and appeals, the court system often seems slow. What are your thoughts on making sure that they receive prompt decisions? You have 2 minutes.
So this is another issue that's close to my heart. My wife owns several small businesses. And if you are the subject matter of a lawsuit, it's going to be very important to you. You're going to wake up every day thinking about that lawsuit. You're going to go to bed every day thinking about that lawsuit. It's the only thing that's on your mind. And as judges, if I was elected as judge, I would remain cognizant of that fact, that these aren't merely numbers to a small business owner. These aren't merely case numbers to an individual. We actually have to be effective and efficient in how we adjudicate, how we decide, how we move forward on these motions and in these cases. We've got to be willing to put the work in. We've got to be hands-on. We got to set firm deadlines, and we got to make sure cases are